beings, we shift into dreams, another wild terrain of being a human. And I have the utter delight and gratitude to welcome here with us Rebecca Wildbear. Mm. Rebecca Wildbear is the author of Wild Yoga, a practice of initiation, veneration, and advocacy for the earth. She's also a soul initiation guide within Animas Valley Institute. And I have experienced her. Wow, she was one of my main guides in my, for sure, one of my guides in my first vision fast. That changed my life completely. Yeah, she is an exquisite, like this is the proper use of the word exquisite. She's an exquisite guide with a perception as sharp as it is tender, and she takes you to the places that you cannot even imagine that existed in your being. She's really keen to all that is wild, natural, and animate. She has so much love and devotion for Earth that cracks my heart only to imagine her, even more so to have her in our circle. And she will come to Romania this year in July. The end of July, she will be in Romania for the first time, uh, guiding two programs, the Dreamwork Intensive and the Dreamwork Training. So if you are called by dreams, and she will have her particular way to call you in this session to be courted and taken by dreams, we are, welcoming you also in Romania to see her and experience her in flesh. Thank you, Rebecca, for being here with us today. So much
Thank
gratitude for your
you.
presence.
Thank you, Sandra. What an exquisite invitation or welcome to the stage, so to speak. Thank you. That's really beautiful. I'm so glad to be here. What an amazing offering to bring together so many people offering so many wonderful things. And I'm glad to be dreams following songs because in some way dreams are like songs or poems or stories that come to us in the night from something greater than our own mind and ego, something mysterious where I can't say exactly, what is it, but it does seem very related to some kind of higher power, um, the earth, the soul, the larger thread of what's calling. And yeah, I'm so excited to be. Dreams is one of my favorite topics, so I'm excited that I'm coming to Romania to focus for two 5-day programs on dreams. One program is just living the dream, like exploring your own dream world more deeply from a soul-centric place, and the other is learning how to work with dreams. How do you work with other people's dreams? And so 10 days of dreams. And I'm happy that we have this next 75 minutes to focus on dreams together. And I want to bring in, I know this is the summit about soul, why the soulful living. And so I just want to first focus on dream work as it relates to soul. And then I'm going to take it out to an even larger scope. Uh, it was Carl Jung who said soul speaks through image. So if we're tracking soul, we're listening for our who is our soul? What is our soul's image? What's the image, as David White would say, the image at the center we are born with? What's that image? What's that image that defines who we are? And so if we're seeking a soul encounter or multiple soul encounters or soul initiation, having a relationship with our dream world is central. It's essential. There were dreams. There's one dream in particular, but there were multiple dreams that make up the image that I have discovered at the center of my soul. And I've worked with so many people over the last 2 decades, and it really was dream work that often came to them as an aspect that's central to mirroring something about their deepest essence. And sometimes we can't always tell in a dream, gosh, is this my soul, or is this a guide, or what is this? But one thing that we can tell for sure usually is that the dream is a source of intelligence beyond our mind that's coming to us, giving us a personal invitation, a personal letter to pay attention to something specific. So it's always amazing to me. People are enamored by dreams, but sometimes dream programs can be the hardest to fill because people want to do dream work, but not today. Because there's often like things about our dream work that are hard. It's like, that's great. I want to get in touch with my dream world. I want to listen to my dreams. Yeah, it's on the top of the list, but yeah, I got other things to do right now. And the dream often faces us with some of the hardest things to look at. It usually gives us a personal concoction of like, gosh, that's really uncomfortable to be with. I don't know if I want to speak that out loud. Sometimes it can be different. Sometimes we can get dreams that we're just like, wow, this is amazing. I love my dream life. I love my dream world. And I've, I like my dream world better than my waking world. And I want to go back in there. That can happen sometimes. But more often, it seems to be that we often get a concoction that's like some version of, oh, I don't think that was much of anything. Oh, that was a work dream. Oh, like, or, um, yeah, like, I don't, gosh, I don't really like what happened there. That's really uncomfortable. I don't think I want to share that one. And sometimes dreams give us a personal invitation of what's most uncomfortable for us. Like, uh, like it, I've had people tell me, I don't want to share my dream because it's just too embarrassing. And can I just share it with you? It's really embarrassing. And then when they share the dream with me, I have to sometimes ask, can you tell me what the embarrassing part is? Because I can't always tell. Because that's what I mean by the dream gives us our personal concoction of what's most uncomfortable. It might seem like it would be uncomfortable to everyone, but it's really just something about for us to be with. The dream is bringing up shadow material, things our ego didn't want to notice or pay attention to. One of the things I always ask, couple of questions I always ask the dream maker, dream world, dreams is, what is the dream world trying to have me experience? I'm always listening for that with dream work. And if you know, a lot of times we tell stories from our own ego's perspective, something like, oh, this happened to me and it was wonderful, or it was horrible, and this person did this and it was great, or it was awful, and that person did this and they're wonderful, or gosh, I don't like them so much. You know, that's very ego perspective dream. And that's how we kind of navigate life. Now, if we're listening to dreams for what does the dream maker want this human to experience? I always say, I don't really work for the human when I'm listening to a dream. I work for the dream world. So I'm not trying to, you know, kind of collude with the dreamer's experience of the dream, although I'm listening to that part of the story. But I'm also listening for something more. What is the dream world wanting this person to experience? And then I ask, I wonder why. That's where I get real curious. I wonder why the dream world wants this person to experience this. And so when I'm listening, all my questions are usually connected to those questions, those underlying questions. I want to share something with you. I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to share an excerpt from my book about dreams and the mythos of soul, which is going to allow us to kind of hear a little bit more. There's a little bit more of my story in there about how dreams are helping me connect, how dreams helped me connect to the mythos of my soul. And there's a video, you know, with imagery, so it's kind of fun to watch. It's an excerpt of my book set to video about dreams and the mythos of soul. And again, we're going to be heading into the larger terrain of the dream world as a whole and community and dreaming with nature and community. But I just want to bring this perspective of its relationship to our soul life to begin. And this, I think this video will help with that. So, see if I can. Here it is. Share.
Every dream is a complex matrix of characters, places, dynamics, and images, inviting us into multiple worlds. There are many things to be curious about. Who is visiting? What is happening? What do the others in the dream sense, feel, or want? When we see through the eyes of one or more aspects of a dream, the images and elements can dissolve our ego, alter our sense of self, and initiate us into the mysteries of the night world. Dreams may connect us to the past, the future, ancestors, the dead, aspects of our psyche, personal and cultural shadows, archetypal energies, and mysterious and wild presences. Dreams can also give us a glimpse of the mythic purpose of our souls. A lot can come from one dream, and multiple dream images can weave themselves into a larger tapestry over time. Here's a condensed snapshot of a version of my soul story. I am in a cave womb, under a world mother tree, in a forest that is on fire. Where the cave wall is cracked, the earth's heart echoes in rhythm with my own. I ride waves of love and heartbreak, immersed in the dark waters of a cave pool that flows into an underground river. The bear lives in the cave womb, on the river, and in the burning forest. I float as and with him in the dark waters, a guide on the underground river, a witness to horror and beauty, a wild love prayer. Living the mythos of my soul is humbling because it feels impossible. Trying to be who the dream reveals strengthens me to grow into what it asks. I use mythos and dream interchangeably because our mythos is a kind of dream. In particular, the mythic images we receive from the night world ask us to do and become things that other parts of us would rather avoid. Ego often tries to keep our mythos out of awareness. Once we glimpse what our soul is asking, we may feel compelled to bring that vision to life. Dreams can heal us and guide us in living our deepest intentions. Living what they ask restores our vitality. We honor dreams by listening, exploring, and embodying them. The dream world has viewed the more remarkable and accurate shape we are meant to take, and dream by dream, it guides us there. What the mythos of our soul asks is greater and more mysterious than any particular role, vocation, or craft. I am more than a writer or a guide. I am a woman living in the cave womb under a world mother tree. Yet particular roles, like my role as a dream guide, are a way to express what the dream asks. Each dream we honor and act on initiates us into a collaborative relationship with the dream world. More dreams come when we listen to and embody the ones we have been given. As a guide, I help dreamers keep the enigmatic images of their dreams alive. From the unique perspective of my mythic soul, I invite others to dialogue with dream characters, represent them artistically, or move with them to music. While listening to dreams, I imagine myself in the cave womb and feel the earth's heart echo. I invite people into the cave to gestate in the primordial potentialities of the wild imagination, like a hibernating bear in winter. As I listen underground, swimming in the dark waters of love and grief, I long to serve the forest.
So hopefully that gave you a sense of dream world and its potentiality of being connected to the mythos of our soul. The mythos of our soul can be like a dream story, maybe even a song, um, great to track over time. Um, you know, the story that I shared in that video about my soul image, it didn't come all in one, um, all in one dream. It came over multiple years, actually, uh, just different pieces of it. Some pieces came through dreams. Some pieces came through deep imagination. Some pieces came through wanders in nature. And then it came together into a story. So hopefully that's helpful. And when I talk about dreams and community, dreams with nature and community, which is the theme of this class, I'm envisioning, you know, what would it be if everyone was in contact with their souls? What would it be if everyone was in relationship with their dream world, which seems like it's goes hand in hand. In some ways, being in relationship with our dream world means being in relationship with our soul. But as I shared in the video too, you know, the dream world can give us images of the mythos of our soul, but it also communicates so many things. The possibilities of what it could communicate are taking us into the past, bringing us into the future, bringing us into guides, bringing us into other worlds, giving us a direction on where to put our focus, helping us feel our life as it is more fully, taking us into shadow parts of ourself that we're not noticing, opening up other powerful energies that we haven't been aware of that exist inside of us. So there, and there's so much more. So the dream world, the scope of the dream world can take us lots of places. And when I imagine a community that lived according to its dreams, I think about my ancestors. You know, that my ancestry is, of course, it goes back further than I can know, but the ancestry that I know goes back to the Norse and Celtic cultures in Ireland, England, and in Sweden. So, you know, actually not that far removed. My mother was born in England. My father's family is mostly Irish. My mom's father is Swedish. So, and his parents were born in Sweden. So my ancestors actually haven't been in the US for too long. They inhabit that area. And if we go back into their history, the nature-based cultures that existed there were, you know, lived, listened to their dreams. That dreams were a powerful source of guidance for their life, spiritually and practically on an everyday basis. in nature-based cultures, people listen to their dreams like people in this culture watch the news. People watch the news to orient themselves. What's happening in the world? Well, it used to be people oriented themselves in the dream world to understand what's happening in the world, not just this world like right here in front of me, but this world too, but the larger worlds and worlds which we're all connected to. And as most of you know, in this culture, an importance to the dream world has been lost. And it's, honestly, it breaks my heart that mainstream culture's view, for the most part, is that dreams have no meaning. There's neurologists whose main focus is dreams, and they have done videos confirming, based on studies of rats, that dreams have no meaning. And so that's the story that's getting pushed in mainstream culture. And so but that is not the story that's true, nor the one that's existed for most of the times humans have been on the planet. And so it takes a bit to push back to that, because if you speak about the dream world, people judge you or think that you might be like I'm trying to think of some of the words, like pseudo-scientific, or that's often a word that's used in culture. It's not real science, because real science is based on those rat studies of neurologists. So you're pseudo-scientist, or you're just kind of out there in some other realm that's not true. But so it takes a lot to hold on to an understanding that actually we're rooted in something much larger than science could even touch into, could even understand. Something ancestral and bigger, and that it's possible to reconnect to that energy. And one of the main pathways that I like to speak about is it's about having a relationship with your dream world. Your dream world, if you think about your dream world as an actual world or being, it's like any other being. If I have a relationship with it, that means I pay attention to it. I listen to it. I try to understand it even when I don't. It can be like, if you have a dog, I have a dog. You try to understand your dog because you love your dog, but you don't always understand. Your dog is a different creature. You can't always understand everything about what he needs, what he wants, what he's feeling, but you try because you love him. If we believe in the dream world, we might not understand everything that it's saying all the time, but we do our best to turn our attention toward it, which means, having a journal, writing it down in the present tense, maybe drawing it, reflecting on these questions. What does the dream world want me to experience? I wonder why. A great practice with dreams too is to play with the dream by telling the story of your dream from another character's perspective. How would they tell the story of your dream? So a lot of this is using imagination, because imagination and the dream world are very connected. And again, imagination is a thing sometimes that gets an even worse rap than the dream world. In our mainstream culture, we get taught imagination, we should be done with it by first grade. It's for kindergartners. And then we get on to more stuff like knowledge. But again, as Carl Jung said, image speaks through soul. It's like imagination is everything in soul work. It's everything. And it is a window of knowing. Thinking is one window of knowing. And it can be powerful. Powerful insights and intuition can come through thinking, just as much as neurotic thinking can come through that window. Sensing and feeling are also windows of knowing. But imagination also is a window of knowing. If we imagine it, then there's something coming through to us, some kind of truth, some kind of possibility, especially if it's the deep imagination. The deep imagination means our mind's not really involved. That's why dreams are pure deep imagination. Our mind is turned off when we dream, so our mind is not involved in the stories that come through. Our thinking mind isn't. Our brain is involved, but not our thinking mind. And so Um, but that can happen during the day too. It can happen if our mind is turned off and we attend to these images. And so that's why you can step back into your dream in when you're awake. You can intentionally decide to turn towards it. You can go back into it. You can see what it feels like. You can try to re-experience it. So that's what I mean by giving your attention to the dream world. Just as you might give your attention to your dog or to your friend or to your family. Those are places when you love someone, you put your attention. So putting your attention in the dream world is going back in there and being curious and exploring. And that's how we reestablish this connection with the dream world that our culture has mostly taught us to not have. That's why it's it's not easy. It's like turning toward a friend and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry that I ignored you for all these years. I gave my attention to other things, and you were confusing. I didn't understand how I could hang out with you because you didn't make any sense to me. And also I was taught that you're not important, but I know that you are now." And it's one thing to learn in soul work too, that it's essential to hang out with a mystery. There's something in our brain that we only want to hang out with something that makes sense. It's like, why would I hang out with something that I don't understand? If you don't understand it, that's mystery. And it's still important. There's things that shift and change from hanging out with mystery, from hanging out with the mysteries in our dream, which just means spending times in the rooms and the images that come with us, to the beings that come with us in our dream world, even if we don't know what they mean. We stay open and curious. At any point, we could understand more, just like in any other relationship, right? We're getting to know somebody. We don't know them right away. We get to know them. And some images are what we might call, what Robert Bosnak would call ego-syntonic, which means our ego likes. And those are the ones we might really want to get to know. Those could be the easiest ones to start with. Gosh, I love this place my dream world took me to. Oh my God, it's the most amazing tree. It's the most exquisite landscape. Or, oh, I met like a woman or a man and they're just like, wow, like I admire them. They're everything I'd want to be. Or there's just an atmosphere and feeling in the dream that I really liked. Ego-syntonic. The ego is naturally drawn to it. Those are great to start with because you want to know them. You want to return to them. And then what Robert Bosnak would call ego-dystonic images are ones our ego's like, ugh, like, God, I don't like that. I'm scared of it. I don't like that landscape. I don't like that character. Those are the hardest ones to be with. And so we might want a friend or a guide to help us to go back in. Those are the ones we might want to just forget about, pretend that didn't happen. But often the scariest elements of the dream are some of the most significant. Nightmares are the dream world speaking to us loudly, like, pay attention to this. You don't miss this. I'm not going to let you ignore this. I'm speaking so loudly that it's going to be impossible for you to ignore this. Or recurring dreams. I'm going to keep coming back and repeating this message because it's so important. So even though it's hard to be with that, we want to, if we can. Sometimes we don't have the wholeness, so you have to ask yourself if you do, or if you don't, then the next step might be to cultivate your wholeness to help you be able to have the courage to be with that really scary dream image. And if it's hard to even just be present with it or stay with it, that's where you might get some help from a dream guide or maybe even another community member who knows a lot about dreaming, dream listening, and how to be with dreams, how to honor dreams. A lot of times working with nightmares is a little bit like facing the bully in the schoolyard. It's like, I go back in and how can I turn toward the thing I'm running from? A lot of times when I've worked with nightmares with other people in particular, it's not what you think. When finally we're able to work up the courage, person is ready. You never want to force it, But when the person is ready to turn in towards that one, it can take some time for that to happen. But when the person is ready to do that, oftentimes what they thought what was chasing them, it's not what they thought it was. It's something entirely different. So, a great question in dream work is, what is the ego wrong about? Usually the ego is wrong in the dream about their perspective of many things. So we have to hold the ego's perspective a little bit lightly. Like, could be true. I don't know. Could be true, but might not be, because the ego's often wrong in the dream. So I want to leap into helping us envision a little bit. This is the vision that I like to hold, is what would it be like if not only you personally honored your dreams, but what if we built communities in the world that honored their dreams? What if we were able to call back what once existed? Communities where everyone listened to the dream world for guidance. This is this is kind of a little bit of a happy image for me, but one of my teachers, Martin Practau, he would say that in the Mayan culture, the Sutihil Mayan culture that he lived, that did listen to their dreams, people elected officials based on the number of villagers who dreamed that person into office. That's a fun thing for me to remember at this particular juncture in political life. What would that be like if the person that was put in charge of the community, of the country, was because it came through the dream, as guidance and direction through the dream world? So again, dreams help with practical, that's what that would be considered, practical guidance, like direct outer world specific suggestions, practical guidance. We can get that from the dream world just as much as we can get spiritual and soul and underworld direction about the moves that we're called to make in our own lives. What would it be like if a community honored their dreams in this way? What would that do? How would that change individuals? And how would that change the world as a whole and the way it operated? And part of my imagination, I love story, so I'm very into storytelling. And so I read a book, and I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to share a little bit of the story. I certainly couldn't share the whole novel because it's very long and complex with lots of pieces. But I'm going to share a story with you today. I love storytelling. That helps us visualize what that might look like. A community that honored its dreams. Because story is such an amazing way to help stretch our imagination, to wonder. And this story is based on an actual novel, a science fiction novel, written by Dorothy Bryant. I don't know if anybody's read it, but it's called The Kin of Ada Are Waiting for You. And it's an amazing story to just get a flavor of a sense of one community that does live according to their dreams. Everything is based on their dreams. In other words, their egos don't decide for them what they're going to do or how they're going to live or whether they should say yes or no to something. The dream world guides them in those directions. And in living a soul-centric life, that's kind of what we're going for too. When we're living a soul-centric life, it's not for our ego. It's not like, what does the ego need and want? Of course, there are things you have to do, like take care of yourself, take care of your basic needs and things like that. It's not like you're not nailing yourself to a cross completely. Like, you are taking care of yourself, but your basic direction in life and what you choose is soul-centric. It's based on the image at the center you were born with. And it's based on the continuing dreams you get guiding you in how to bring that to life, how to live that into the world. And so sometimes you have to make very tough choices, like something your ego would do. You might say, well, that's actually not what the focus is right now. I have to put that aside. This is actually where I'm being directed. So there are I wouldn't say it's you're not a martyr per se, in a complete perspective, not the patho-adolescent view of martyr anyway, but you are making sacrifices. There are sacrifices. You can only do so much in the time that you have. We all have limited time and choices and direction. So listening to soul means that I'm choosing to follow this deeper thread of this call to the best of my ability. I'm listening and tracking it all the time. So in this story, you'll kind of get a sense of a little bit of how does two people in a community do that, and what could it mean for how it could drastically change somebody's life, even somebody egocentric. And that's what the main villain in the story who begins is egocentric. It's an egocentric man that begins the story. Then I don't believe the story even tells his name at any point. But he's a famous author, and in the opening scene, he's sleeping with a woman. They're both kind of drunk and kind of high, and there's an altercation that happens. She's kind of being pushy and needy, and he gets violent. He snaps, and he doesn't mean to, but he kills her. And then he's freaked out. He's scared, and he drives off into the night, and he crashes his car. It rolls down a hill, and when he wakes up, he's somewhere completely different. He doesn't know where it is that he is, but he wakes up in this kind of rock like earthy shelter, and his leg is broken, and so he can't move. Other parts of him are hurt too, but he can't get up and walk. And he sees these people, and they're feeding him off leaves, like they're putting water into his mouth and putting food into his mouth, and caring for his body, keeping him alive somehow. And he catches glimpses of them, but they're not like any people he could ever he's ever seen. They're, some have dark eyes and dark skin, and some have fair skin and blue eyes. So they're kind of like a mix of cultures, and he can't really identify them per se as any people in particular, but they are speaking a language that's very different than his, extremely different. He has no idea anything about what they're saying. So they take care of him, and he's grateful for that, but he surrenders to that fate. But he also is, as he gets well, thinking about, how am I going to get out of this place? Like, I can't understand anything anyone's saying, and I don't know what's going on. And so as soon as he's well enough to limp, he walks up to the top of a mountain to try to get a perspective for where he is. And when he sees where he is, once he gets high enough up on the mountain, he sees that he's actually on an island. And there's no route that he can see anywhere else, to any place different, to escape. And so he's totally freaked out, like, I can't leave this island. But still, he begins to learn the language a bit, and to the extent that he can talk, he's sort of weaving a bit of, I don't know, dissent. Like, he's telling people, this place that you're in, there's so much better stuff. Like, I can show you other places that have so much more stuff, where you can have this and that. I mean, the village is very simple. The food is simple. The housing is simple. They live in, nature rock huts. They have just enough to eat from the food that they have around them. They garden and they hunt, and they live very simply without very much stuff. And so he's trying to say, come on the boat with me. We're going to go somewhere good and going to take you somewhere. And they're being kind. They're kind people, and they're trying to help them. But he, ultimately, he's not getting very far. There's a word, there's two words that he understands very quickly. When people are doing something that people like, they say, "Nabdeo, nabdeo." That means great, good, nabdeo. And then there's a word that everyone says when somebody's doing something that's not great, and it's done me deo, done me deo. And so they don't punish in the village per se, but if they see somebody doing something that's not good, the people will gather around and say, done me deo, done me deo. This isn't good. Kind of like, this isn't of the dream. This isn't of the dream. In this village, everybody's always listening to their dreams to guide them. And he's kind of, you know, as he does kind of become fascinated and curious by watching them. In particular, he begins to fall in love with one woman, one older woman in the village, who's already been with men, and in her mind she's kind of like done with it, you know. She's moved on, she's connected in her spiritual life, and she's not really looking to lie with a man again, be with a man, be in relationship. But she's been having dreams since before this man came to the village. She's been dreaming of him and dreaming that she's to be with him. And so she, you know, this man is liking her, and her ego's sort of like, but the dream world, it seems like, is telling her, you know, this is the direction. And so she begins to get into relationship with this man, and that looks different in the village than it looks in our world. You know, in the village, people don't get married, you know, not until later. If they're together like 20 years, they'll get married, because that means that, well, if they're together like 20 years, then I guess they are supposed to be together forever. In the village, no one is really necessarily supposed to be together forever. They're to be together for as long as they're to be together. And that if they have children, the children are raised by the village. No parents own any particular children. So the woman is simply following the dream, and the man is following his attraction. And you know, he's never really been like this, because normally he's famous and women chase him, and then he's kind of done with them, you know. So he's never really felt a sort of ongoing attraction to continue to want to be closer. And not with a woman like this woman who really could kind of take him or leave him. She's loving him because the dream is inviting her to, and not because she needs to, or needs it to happen. And so in this time of being in this deep love relationship, the man begins to love the village more. In loving this woman, he starts loving and being curious about all the people, and wanting to learn the customs, and wanting to have a place. And he starts also beginning to be curious about dreams. He has one dream, and it's a dream about transcribing stories of the ancient stories of the people, the stories of this culture. They tell a lot of stories. And but they don't write anything down. And he has a dream about himself being the one that's supposed to write him down. So he begins to take on that project with his life. He begins to write down the dreams. And nobody in the village, couple or not, sleeps together at night. They all sleep in a spoke, in a circle, and their heads are together and their feet are out. So they're in a position ready to dream, because it's all about dreaming. As a couple, if they want to get together sexually or sensually, they meet at lunchtime. They have lunch together, and they spend a couple hours outside in the afternoon together. So his life goes on this way for years, and he's not so interested in leaving anymore. He's in love. He's having a relationship. He has meaningful work, and he's enjoying recording the stories of the village. But over the years, he's finding it very challenging to record these stories, because these stories, in many part, they come from the dreams, because this culture is dream centric. And the stories, they keep changing and they keep evolving. So he can never kind of get it down and be done with it, because there's always more story coming through the dream, and there's always changes. And sometimes an old story will come back in a different way, now in a new form, or sometimes there'll be another new story. So he's ever challenged by the complexity of the stories coming through. One thing I didn't tell you about this culture too is that they actually hibernate like bears. They spend the entire winter dreaming. They don't really have enough food in the winter, so that's in part the reason. And so they just have have all their dreaming time in the winter. In the fall, they go into the hut and they dream for months and they don't eat. And most of the time they're laying down, but if they wake up, they just sit up in a kind of meditation and keep dreaming. And so that was the first winter that this man did that was very hard for him. But that was the winter he had the dream about his call to writing down the stories. But it was hard to not eat. It was hard to lie there all that time and listen to the dream. But he did. But each year it got easier. And each year that's what they were doing, is listening ever more fully for the dream. In the spring, when they came back awake, the culture would meet in a very big ceremony. The community would have a gathering, and there would be a big fire in the center, and they would eat. And this community, when they ate, they would feed each other food. So they would pass food around and put it in each other's mouths. And the fire ceremony in the center stood because sometimes every spring, people were called to the other world to leave. And so they would wait, they would open the fire and they would just wait and see if anyone was called. And if somebody was called to the fire, they would walk into the fire and they would die in the fire. They would disappear. They would be eaten by the flames. And so it went every year. They would watch this fire, they would dream, they had their rhythm. And this man stayed there over a decade, maybe like 10 to 15 years. Towards the last few years, the woman that he was in relationship with got called to to sleep in another tent. She was called to still be in relationship with him, but to take more space. So she was sleeping in a different one of the circular community spaces. And then one year it got really this man got really disturbed because the fire ceremony came and his beloved, this woman, got called to the fire. And she went up into the fire. You know, they called for anyone and she went up and he screamed, "No, don't go." But she was following the dream. And so she walked up and she went into the fire. And all the villagers were holding him back and he was sobbing. And she went into the fire and she disappeared. And he was screaming, "This village sucks. This is all," he was screaming the meanest things. "This village sucks. This is all, you've killed her. There's all these strange beliefs. You've killed her." And, the village didn't take offense because they knew he was just grieving. Like he was grieving that his love was no longer going to be able to be with him. And he fell apart for a time in deep grief. But ultimately, he came back to his work and he started encountering her in his dreams. And he'd never been a man, even though he lived in this village, who was centered on his dreams, even though everybody else was. He'd been honoring of the village. He'd loved the woman he's with. He'd loved the work done. And he honored the way the village life lived. And he knew that they lived according to the dream, but he didn't quite get that. But as he started having dreams of this woman that he loved, he knew that now he pretty much too lived for the dreams. He lived for the possibility of seeing her in his dream world and seeing where she might direct him or what she might say or what was next. And, he would encounter her in all different places. He recognized the landscape sometime as places he had been, places in the US, places in South America, places in Europe. He could see the places that she was traveling, and he was with her. And in the dream, he would often go up to her and try to talk to her and try to connect. But he was often dissuaded from doing that. He could see where she was, but he wasn't really allowed to connect with her. So he kept dreaming and he kept listening and he kept following his dreams until some years later, when he was able to actually interact with her in the dream a bit. And they could connect. And then one day he saw her die in the dream. She was at a church in the States, helping out in the church community, and somebody came along and shot her, and he ran to her. And then after that, he felt it was very hard to connect with her energy in the dream world or the waking world. And before long after that, a spring came when he himself was called back to the fire. He was just sitting there. He wasn't expecting to go into the fire. But it just became clear as he was sitting there that the dream, that something was directing him to the fire, that he needed to go. And so he went up, he did it, and he walked into the fire himself. And suddenly he was transported to another place and time. He was in a hospital like the world he used to live in, like 15 years ago, and his leg was broken, and his lawyer was there, and his lawyer was saying, don't worry, I got this handled, I'll take care of this for you. And he didn't quite know, it was a lot for him to be back in that world, like all the sounds and all the people after all those years. And he didn't quite understand what was happening. He didn't quite know where he was, or he didn't quite get it for a while. It took him some days to realize that, well, it's somehow he had ended up back in the same moment he was 15 years ago at the car crash. And it was like no time had passed at all. And he began to wonder, had he been in a dream? Had he made all this up? And he didn't know. And he went back to his house, and he saw all the stuff in his house once he was well. And he just sat there on the couch, and it was hard to take in that this was all of his stuff. Like, how could he have lived with all these things? And he tried to drink some wine, which, well, he had loved to drink, but he didn't drink in 15 years because they didn't have any in the village. Nobody drank in the village. And it made his stomach sour, and it ruined his dreams, and he just didn't want it anymore. And he realized, like, somehow the dream or real life or something had changed him. He wasn't the same person he was, and it was sort of going through his days, not really sure what was going on. And somehow he ended up in a courtroom. He was on trial for the murder of this woman, and his lawyer was, don't worry, we'll get you off for this. And so he was watching his lawyer just talk. He didn't really have to say anything. He was watching everything happen, and something in him, he suddenly stood up in the middle of the court case. He was really wrestling with, like, is this, he wanted to go back to the village because that had been the most deeply meaningful experience of his life. He wanted to go back to the connecting with this woman that he loved because that had been one of the most deeply meaningful experiences of his life. But now he didn't know if that was even real, and he wanted it to be real, but was it? So something, as he was reflecting all this, something moved him, because he didn't really care about anything in this world that he was in now. It's like, it didn't matter to him. So he stood up and he just said, I killed her. I did it. And his lawyer was like, and he was taken away to prison. But in that moment that he stood up and he spoke the truth, something happened. The sky parted, the clouds parted, and suddenly he felt the light shine down, and he felt a deep connection to that world that he had loved, that he had lived in for those 15 years. And he knew that it was real, and he felt connected to her. She was there too. She was shining on him. She was with him. And that was all that mattered to him, and that was real, and that he was connected to it. And he was taken off to jail and sentenced to life in prison. But in many ways, he wrote, what he did was he wrote the stories of his experience in the village. And so psychically, in his imaginal and physical sense, that he was where he wanted to be. He was in the world that made sense to him. he was relating to the dream that had come to him, the life that had come to him, the love that had come to him, the community that had come to him, that lived their life centered around the directions of what the dream invited. So I welcome you to just kind of sit with the stirrings of that story and this imagining of what it would really be like to transform as an individual, as a community, as a culture, as a world, into a place that centered their lives on living according to what the dream directed. And maybe just take a moment. I'd be curious to hear any reflections. If anybody wants to just chime in, like raise their hand for a moment and just chime in if there's a particular flavor, image, of moment of this story that speaks to you. I think the story likes to leave you with a bit of a mystery. You know, it doesn't answer the question entirely. I mean, it
Hmm.
said that he reached a place at the end where he felt like he got an answer, that it was real. But as the reader, you might have your own opinion. You might say maybe it wasn't. You know, the story doesn't tell us for sure. But I think this is one of the things in this work that we all that we wrestle with, is I get a lot of questions from participants in my programs that I guide, and they say, "Is that my imagination or is it real?" And I like to say yes and yes. And that's because we often have a sense that the imaginal or the dream world isn't real somehow, that we have this definition of real as like it has to be like this like physical material thing, and that's all that real is. But
Hmm.
is that really, is that, you know, deeper question might be, is that what does real mean, and what does it really mean for something to be real? It's very interesting how sometimes what we personally remember from a story, a dream, or a poem is really something about like where we're being guided to pay attention to. So sounds like that image is particularly personally powerful for you at the moment. Yeah, there was a sense in that moment too of no escape, right? Like you're on this island and there's no way off. Beautiful. Yeah. A lot of times that's what we're hoping for in the dream world. I think when we look for soul is you know, even though maybe that specific task isn't soul, but we're looking for purpose, you know, something like what's mine to do here in this world, you know, what's the gift I have to give. I'm curious too. I just want to, you know, maybe just to take, if there's any wonderings or wanderings on this, if we allow ourselves to imagine um, a culture, a community, just as a whole, just using this book as kind of a catalyst to help our imagination, this story. Like, if we imagine a culture, a community that centers, you know, its life on the dream, on listening to what comes through the dream time, meaning I often use the word dream and mythos interchangeably, but they are different things. You know, the dream world meaning like just the images, the deep imagination, the dream time at night, like the images coming through that are guiding us, and the mythic dream, which means the particular ongoing dream that we've been invited to live. If we're imagining a dream centric culture or community, you know, what are some things that you imagine? Like what do you see? Like if we're as a community doing like a group imagining, like what would you, how would you see that happening? How would, what would it look like? What would be happening? What do you see? I like to imagine, and that helps me a bit with the transition. I like to imagine it rippling out like a stone that gets thrown in the water, you know, not like a massive movement that everything changes from the top down or anything, but like one person sharing with a dream partner, and then one person sharing with a dream partner becomes one person sharing with a small dream circle, and then that circle expanding, and maybe some of those people going out and forming their own dream circles, and then those dream circles becoming larger dream community, and then it sort of catching on. And that's sort of a way, almost like from the underground waters rippling out and rippling up into larger of the world. But it's fun, and I'll just leave you with that question too, to imagine how would this change happen. But one of the things I had thought about talking about today, and would go on about if we had more time, but I'll just leave you with it, is, you know, having a dream partner in a dream community is a great start to doing what I'm speaking about, living a dream centric life. There's tending our dreams on our own, and I started off in the beginning by giving you some ways to stay present with your dream world personally. Just returning in your imagination. There can be artwork, movement, writing them in the present tense, asking those questions. But there's also, starting again to interact with the human world. How do I, together with somebody else, honor the dream world? And so I would just highly encourage, if you can, having a dream buddy. Like, that's at least one other person who cares about dreams like you do, who's curious about dreams like you are. And you can practice. One of my favorite teachers, Robert Moss, he's written so many books on dreams, and he's very big advocate of dream communities. There's a process he has called lightning dream work. You might look it up. I'm sure you can find lots of stuff on it on the web. He has a book about it too. But you could just find I think there's 7 steps in his lightning dream work. I'm sure you could find a blog article about it. And that's just how to work with dreams quickly with somebody else, how anyone can do it. You don't have to necessarily be a dream expert or a dream guide. And I've distilled his 7 steps down to 4 steps that I often teach in dream communities I work with. And so I'll just tell you what they are now. And maybe you can find a dream buddy to practice with. The first step is just inviting the person to tell the dream in the present tense. This is the most important step. And sometimes if you don't get to any of the other steps, it's okay, because just doing this one is enough. Inviting the person, if ideally, they could read it from their journal if they don't remember, but ideally they remember it. Ideally, they might read it in their journal first, catch their memory up, and then they can just close their eyes and be back in the dream. I always say 95% of you is back in the dream. 5% of you is just kind of reporting out what's happening. So I'm inviting them to be back in their dream. And things can change or be different than they were before when you had the dream the first time. And just letting them speak it out. So, and you're listening, you're just there witnessing them as they're back in the dream. So that's step 1. And again, if you don't get to any more steps, you've done a lot of good work. That's a lot. Step 2, though, if you have time, is to be curious and ask open-ended questions. Like, what's that like? What did that moment feel like? What was the most scary moment in the dream, or the most interesting moment in the dream to you? Or anything, just open-ended, to help them keep exploring more. And sometimes you only get to step 1 and 2, and that's actually great, because you could actually ask questions forever. You could keep going. I work with dreams. Sometimes I only get 10 minutes to work with a dream, so I have to make my questions count when that's the case. But sometimes I get a whole hour, like I have a whole hour session with a client, and all we do is dream work. And even when the hour is done, I never feel like the dream is done. We've worked some of it. Dreams are so complex, they're never really done. So, don't put that pressure on you. And you don't have to understand when you're working dreams. You don't have to fully understand what's happening. You're just hanging out in a mystery with somebody and helping them explore this mystery by your own curiosity, or asking them what they're curious about, where they're drawn. So that's step 1 and 2, the most important 2 steps. Step 3, this one does come from Robert Moss, is if you want to offer some reflection, like a final statement, I say, if this were my dream, I would explore this. If this were my dream, I'd be curious about this. If this were my dream, I'd want to hang out more with this. So you're giving them an invitation for something in particular. If this were my dream, here's how I'd keep playing and exploring with this. And again, we can project when we're working with somebody else's dream, like it might be our stuff can get triggered. So we're giving, by saying if this were my dream, we're giving the person permission to take or leave what we say. Maybe it'll work for them, maybe it won't. You're just, if this were my dream, this is what I'm moved by, curious about. So yeah, like, and then the final step is I just like to give the dreamer the final word. And I often say, what do you feel curious to keep exploring in this dream? Because when we finish working with a dream, we don't want to be finished. Oh, we're done with the dream. Let's put it on the shelf. We actually want to have built more curiosity and more desire to keep hanging out with it, to keep exploring it. So those are the 4 steps. And if you can, your homework, if you want some, it's optional. The invitation is to find a dream buddy and see if you can each use those steps to play with a dream and start beginning to build dream community, 1 and 2 people at a time, and let it ripple out from there. So thank you all. Thank you all very much. It's been really wonderful to be with you. And Sandra, thank you so much for creating this amazing space and this wondering offering. I'm so grateful to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for your amazing offering. Thank you for bringing us closer to this central practice of soulcraft. Yeah, many of my threads, images of my mythos are coming from the dream world. So yeah, in a way, it is kind of guaranteed that the dream world will make your world, make and unmake your world. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for such abundance of clarity and yeah, richness of what is a dream and how precious they are to our life. Thank you. And we are reminding you all that in Romania we actually are going to have a 10 days, 5 days and 5 days program, being maybe that community that Rebecca was inviting us to dream, doing just that, being maybe in the timelessness and for hours and hours and hours, being with our dreams, with the land, with the guides, with each other, and also with the dreams. It's just, yeah, make time. Maybe this is the most important thing that you can ever, no, not necessarily ever, but most important thing that maybe this year you can offer to yourself, spending time, intimate time in this dream world. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.